So, but I'm really very, very excited to have Gil Verdon join us. He's came in from New York. So Gil and I recently had a conversation on my podcast, Objectively Speaking. I think it was just 2 weeks ago. He and I originally met at an X Prize Visioneering conference where he was pitching a massive prize on how to make computing more efficient as we get ready for the massive demands of AI computing that are coming down the road. Perhaps you hear some people talking about, oh, we got to build more nuclear, we got to drill more, and yes, we need all of that. But Gil is kind of a first principles type of thinker, and he said, well, all right, but perhaps we should also look at chips and find ways to make them more efficient as well. So he is the founder of Extropic, a startup tech company working on new kind of computer chip. He is also known to many of us in this room as @based Beff Jezos on X, and I think very relevant to many of us here, he is the founder of the Effective Acceleration, or EAC movement, which promotes rapid, unregulated technological progress, particularly in AI, to maximize human potential and economic growth, something that I think we can all agree with. So please, let's give a warm welcome to Gil. Okay, and just also raise your hand if you are in science or in engineering or in technology or, all right, quite a few. So I want to encourage you, we're going to leave some time for questions. This is a really very rare opportunity to do that. And of course, asking a question is a good way of introducing yourself and perhaps getting some more of Gil's time during the rest of the time we have today. So. One of the things, I know we have a few Canadians here as well, and I was, roasting you earlier, and I talked about how objectivists over-index with Canada. We've got Canadians or, former Canadians on our board, our scholar, Stephen Hicks, many of our donors, and a lot of our students. And so I was just wondering, how growing up immersed in Canada in this environment where, altruism and a bigger embrace of government, how did that make you feel growing up, and whether or not that might have influenced your later trajectory of I got to get out of here. I got to go where I can hustle.
Yep. Yeah, certainly. I grew up in Montreal, Quebec, which is, even higher degree of regulation than Canada, and there's definitely a sort of feeling of authoritarianism coming from the top down. Of course, there's, I think, the highest density of language laws. I don't know if it's in the world, but it's up there. It's pretty bad. They force you to learn French, and they don't want you to learn English so that you can escape. They want you to stay there and pay taxes for the rest of your life. And so for me, I was always growing up anti-authoritarian. I didn't want to get told what to think. I thought I was smarter than the authorities, which, I wanted to derive, my opinions from first principles. And I didn't like that I was prescribed a language I had to speak, right? I was like, well, what's the lingua franca of the world? What's going to give me the most opportunities? I should learn English, right? And so, luckily my parents had the vision and helped me go to bilingual school, which is definitely not supported by the government. They definitely want you to go to no private schools. They want you to go to public school and learn French and stay there and have a very thick accent the rest of your life. So luckily I learned English when I had high neuroplasticity, managed to escape, but definitely it, growing up there created a sort of cognitive immune response to authoritarianism, and also I think I think things were okay when I was in my 20s, but I felt like there was a soft ceiling on opportunity, and there's a sort of collectivist mindset. Okay, no, you should just be a doctor or a lawyer. Your compensation should sort of cap off. What do you mean you're more ambitious than this? You want to build a big enterprise. What do you mean, like just being an engineer or doctor or lawyer is not enough, and just being a cog in the machine is not enough for you? There's sort of tall poppy syndrome. They try to cut you down, or
who do you think you are?
Yeah, who do you think you are,
Too
right?
big for your britches.
Yeah. And so, for me, it was like, what are you going to do? A degree in math? Oh, you're going to go to California, be a theoretical physicist, be a tech entrepreneur? What do you mean, right? And I kind of did all that. And so, to me, it was kind of like, they were trying to keep me trapped, and that created a sort of back reaction. And then, I guess, actually during the pandemic, for various visa reasons, I ended up back in Canada working remotely for Google, and just being stuck in Canada and feeling trapped kind of was the pressure cooker from which maybe Beff was born.
Yes, you had
back reaction.
Decided you were going to shrug.
Yeah,
so
that's right.
Let's, as we saw, we have plenty of engineers and STEM students here. We also have some, art students and folks like me. So tell us, what is quantum computing in very, very simple layman's terms?
Yeah, well, so if you look at the physics of the very small, the physics of particles, it actually doesn't obey probability theory. It's not, a particle is here or there. It's actually superpositions of configurations. And superpositions are this weird concept that is basically parallel universes, or that can interfere with one another, like in the same way mathematically that waves can interfere, either constructively or destructively, right? Like if I stack a bunch of events of this or this, and then 20% this event or 80% this event, and then another coin that's maybe 50-50, and then I stack the heads and tails, let's say, then the interference is always additive, right? You just add up the different variables, whereas in quantum you can have destructive interference. And that is very unique, and you can't really emulate that at scale with a regular computer. And so you can build a quantum mechanical computer, a computer that leverages these weird physics that we know as quantum physics. And you can do all sorts of calculations you can't do on a conventional computer, such as simulating matter that is very exotic, simulating black holes, which is what was our favorite pastime at Google X to entertain Sergey. Who knows? All sorts of applications will come up as we build these devices and make them much bigger, but one application is breaking encryption. Right?
Okay, well, talking about Google and your time there, what were you working on?
I worked on a lot of things. So my first entry into Google was essentially the Google Quantum team found me when I was a student, and that's when I teamed up with Trevor originally, and they wanted us to figure out how to bring AI to quantum computers, how to program the earliest quantum computers, because I was the first programmer of quantum computers. I was the first user of Rigetti, and then Google was like, how are we going to program these things, and how are we going to run AI on it? So I did some of the first algorithms for that, and then was brought on and built essentially a product known as TensorFlow Quantum, which is how to bring quantum computation to AI workflows. And then over time, Sergey Brin and his entourage kind of poached me for a special team working on quantum sensors, quantum communication, and of course still quantum software and AI. But the vision there was to be able to capture quantum mechanical data from the world, communicate it, and then process it, right? Because Google makes sense of the information about the world and collects it, and here we want to extend the type of information we could capture and process, which was a pretty big vision. And we started a team, and then it grew and grew. But over time, I thought that quantum technologies were kind of like nuclear fusion. They were going to struggle to go past the break-even point. I think they will. It's just on time scale, it's much slower than my patience. And instead, I went to build this new paradigm that to me is more like nuclear fission that we could do right now, but has similar sort of gains.
Wasn't it a little, look, here you were in school, they plucked you out, you're working with Sergey Brin.
Yeah.
Wasn't it a little scary to leave? And what was the thinking process on that?
Yeah, that was, again, I think, my family and everyone in Canada were like, showing me, to me, they were pointing towards the gradient of lower risk, so I just did the opposite of what people told me, and that was the gradient of positive towards risk, and that worked out, right? I think people underestimate how like the greatest risk is to take no risk, and I made the jump, and I don't regret it now. I think the spin out and so on, I ended up not following it and so on, so I didn't get huge upside from that, but still, the experience and the connections I've made, and then some of the discoveries, the evolution of my thinking, it set myself up to become an entrepreneur and be on this path now. So again, like if you have to take a leap of faith and all your friends and your family are telling you it's crazy, you should just do something more conservative, you should play it safe, don't listen to them. Just go for it.
Yeah. Well, so I had you on, objectively speaking, 2 weeks ago, and then this week I had on Jimmy Soni, who wrote The PayPal Mafia.
Right.
And what was so fascinating about that interview and about the book was, we think of these great towering titans like Elon Musk and Peter Thiel and David Sachs and Max Levchin. But this was like the story of them when they were 20, when they were 22, when they were your age. And some of them left school to go ahead and start this. And maybe, can you give any advice on why maybe deciding to take that big risk and try a startup and fail, and then try again when you're in your 20s is something that, you could do at any point in your life.
I think it's like, to me, having agency and not being told what to do and having control over the outcome, in the sense you could always work harder, be more creative, get a breakthrough, and solve your problem if you're an entrepreneur. But sometimes, let's say you're stuck working on a national lab, or you're stuck under an oppressive government, or you're stuck under an oppressive giant organization, then sometimes you don't have that agency. Your action space is very limited, and that sort of erodes your will and your energy, right? Like you have less dopamine because you can't capture the reward. There's a sort of soft ceiling again to the reward you can capture. And to me, I think breaking free and being out in the world and it being very high stakes actually unlocked the full capabilities of my brain. You have way more dopamine, right? Because there's much higher variance in reward. You could fail completely, even though I don't think it's as bad as you think if you do fail as an entrepreneur. Like there's a whole culture to support you to try it and try again. But there's basically unlimited upside, and to me that unlocked much more dopamine, which is a great neurotransmitter, and unlocked much greater cognition. And so to me, I'm doing the best work of my life, again, because I have the agency to bring it to market, and I know it's not going to be a project that's just going to get randomly killed because of some internal politics at the organizational level or at the government level.
Right.
Yeah.
So let's talk about Extropic. I think you might even have a board or something.
Yeah. Oh, there you go.
Okay.
There you go.
Yeah.
Right.
And to what it is and where you guys are in the production process.
Yeah. So it's probably one of the most ambitious computing projects since computing itself, frankly. Which that's not how I pitched it at the beginning, but started off incrementally, but frankly, at this point we're going for it. Essentially, we're reinventing the whole stack from the electrons up, trying to understand. Well, we have understood how the physics, how electrons behave when you go up to much lower power in silicon. They basically become jittery, which is a problem for traditional computers, because if your electrons kind of hop around and your transistor flips when it shouldn't, your computer crashes. Again, traditional computer. But if instead you built a sort of anti-fragile computer that operates a bit more like biology, where the randomness of these electron jitters you can harness and run algorithms such as AI, recommender systems, simulations of finance, biology, and so on, run them as a physical process in the physics of this hardware, then you save a lot on energy and you gain a lot of speed. And so we call it thermodynamic computing because it's using a type of physics called out-of-equilibrium thermodynamics, and that type of physics is not the physics you obtain when you go to the very, 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 very small, like quantum. It's not the physics of the very large, that is deterministic physics. It's somewhere in between, right? It's the mesoscales in the middle. So again, it's kind of the physics of molecules or proteins, right? They're kind of fluctuating about. So we essentially steer and harness those fluctuations in order to do something called probabilistic inference, which is a very general form of machine learning or AI and generalizations thereof. And to me, it's kind of like, again, I don't take, I don't respect anything that's been established. Oh, this is how it's been done for 50 plus years. It's like, yeah, well, can you explain why my first principles thinking is wrong? And nobody can disprove me. And I thought about it for 10 years. I thought it was, 8 years before starting it. And I thought it was crazy, but I couldn't disprove myself, so I had to go for it. And now we've demonstrated in the lab. So we start off with a very elaborate room-sized computer, and then within a year we had already miniaturized it to silicon to run at room temperature, and it was covered in Wired recently, if you want to check it out, Extropic on Wired. And now we're scaling up. We're building a much bigger chip, and we're scaling this at a pace that's much faster than people expect. And it's completely going to change the narrative when it comes to the energy requirements to scale AI. And it's also, to me, it was one of the most important things I could be doing because we don't want to become reliant on China for producing the most advanced AI chips if AI is going to be so crucial to our daily lives. And Taiwan is obviously at risk right now from being taken over by China. We'll see how that works out. But for me, I had to figure out how to make the most advanced AI chips in America, and that was going to be through a more clever method than just trying to scale things the old-fashioned way. And so we did figure this out. So we actually did a recent run in the US with these chips, and we see a slight bump in performance compared to Taiwan, in fact. So,
wow, that's impressive.
Yeah.
All right, yes, let's applaud for that. So you mentioned you were in Canada.
Yeah.
Back in Canada because of the visa issue during some of the most brutal debanking,
Yeah.
of the trucker protests, the just really brutal squashing of them, and draconian restrictions. So let's talk a little bit about Beff Jezos. I mean, if you're not following him on X, I highly recommend that you do. I mean, it is an account, I think the day that we had you on the show, that like you and Elon were back and forth, like, I don't know, 20 times that day. Yeah, so like, was it just an outlet for your political frustrations, or was it also part of this other idea that you had been incubating along with the technical ideas that you'd been incubating, and that's this vision for effective acceleration?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of both. Like I always, my whole life, I would have like my private thoughts, right, of what I actually thought about things, and
so
then
censoring.
Yeah, self-censoring, and I would just like try to operate within the system. I didn't have as much freedom as agency as I wanted, but I kind of over time build my own model of how the world works, right, from first principles. And at some point, I wanted to share it with the world, but I wanted to experiment with an anonymous account because I wanted to be evaluated on the merit of my ideas, right, rather than just like, people looking at my credentials and then evaluating whether they should listen to me or not, which, unfortunately now my identities were merged. But, originally I just want to experiment in this sort of arena of the idea marketplace, right? And I was seeing sort of Silicon Valley be consumed by a certain monoculture that was, towards, alarmist or towards AI doomerism, and I was seeing the movie play out where they would harness this sort of fear mongering in order to achieve regulatory capture, centralized control, and then you'd have an oppressive government that's the only organization that's allowed to have AI, and then we'd have one of these futures like collectivist futures like an Anthem or like in 1984, and I wanted to avoid that, and so. At some point, I realized I needed to start a counterculture, and I needed to, steer the brilliant minds in Silicon Valley because they become the entrepreneurs that affect the policies of organizations, and steer them towards a different type of philosophy. And so, I wrote some notes for myself, and then eventually we published them, and they kind of went viral in the right circles, and they became very influential in Silicon Valley, and then the rest has been history. It's just spread since then, and I guess over the past year got over 1 billion views of my account and my content, and of course I package it. I package it in a certain way that's maybe disarming to sort of the counterparties, the philosophers that are sort of holier than thou, and they take themselves very seriously. And so if there's a character, that's like this, avatar that's like larger than life, that's arguing with them. It's a cartoon avatar named Beff Jezos. Then they tend to not want to argue with me because they don't want to lower themselves to my level to get down in the mud. And so that allowed me to operate sort of unopposed for a while and grow the movement until it was too late. And at some point, we essentially really affected policy in the United States. I think a lot of our policy prescriptions, there's been many forks of the movement. There's been the techno-optimist manifesto from our Andreessen friend, and very much aligned with the thinking of EAC. And now that's very much some of the policy prescriptions in the United States. It's like we can't slow down. We can't let the fear mongers win. We can't centralize control. That's not how we beat China. We beat China by embracing radical individualism, embracing freedom for exploration of how we do AI, and that's really the strength of the United States. Is like we have sort of this radical individualism, and it leads to far greater speed of innovation compared to centralized control. Right?
Well said. Well, we are big fans of Andreessen's Techno-Optimist Manifesto. In fact, Rob Trasinski, our senior fellow at the Atlas Society, has written at length about it. But speaking of Beff Jezos, I mean, the elephant in the room is what to make of this. I kind of feel like we're in the rom-com where the couple has like the major fight. I'm not sure I want to stick around for the makeup sex, but
yeah, we'll see what happens. I think Elon, and I primarily sort of backed Elon, but I did some work behind closed doors to convince a lot of technologists. You think SF is leaning towards a certain side, but there was a sort of stealth counter movement, stealth shift to the red behind closed doors. There was a vibe shift, and we engineered it over the last couple years, and really it was like, at least for technologists, it was like, hey, we need smaller government, we need more freedom to explore and to advance this AI technology. We don't have time to deal with all this red tape. That's going to slow us down significantly. And that was the sort of sales pitch to get a lot of people that were traditionally Democrat to vote for this party, and really I think Elon was sort of the catalyst to bring it all together and get those votes. So I know that for technologists, let's say in Silicon Valley, like Elon was a big part of their votes for the party. So hopefully, they can still work together. Obviously, there's still 3.5 years to go, and there's a lot of policy to be written. So I hope everything works out. But I know Elon's like considering now, we had some more interactions over the past 24 hours, creating a sort of America or libertarian optimist sort of party. We'll see how that works out. Traditionally, sometimes breaking up the base into more parties is not always optimal to win. But at the same time, I think the threat of exit or the threat of this fork can maybe bring Republicans to really consider that small government and lowering the budget is sort of important. Really, we gotta be competitive with China, and the way to do that is private industry, get out of the way, don't put too much red tape in the way, and reduce the size of government. And if they're not doing that, then it's good that I think Elon drew a line in the sand and stands by his principles and sounded the alarm.
Yeah, well, it's like Ayn Rand said that her vision for economics was a complete separation of the economy and the state in the same way and for the same reasons that we have a separation of church and state.
Yep.
So one of the things that you and Elon talk about and back and forth about online is the Kardashev scale. So that was kind of new to me. Maybe, I'm sure the engineers in the audience know what that is, but talk about that.
Yeah, we kind of popularized that. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the, there's more theoretical underpinnings behind EAC, behind why I think, freedom is kind of fundamentally important and individualism is fundamentally important. I see all of civilization as one big self-adapting complex system that every bit of it is sort of dynamically shifting and searching over how to reconfigure itself in order to maximize its growth. And this is something that appears in the equations of stochastic thermodynamics. It's a principle we use to design our computers in a way that's bio-inspired. And to me, actually, that type of physics, thermodynamics, applies to all the scales between quantum and cosmos. And so it applies to, just looking at civilization like itself, like our whole planet as a petri dish, right? And then you can make some predictions of where it'll go. And in general, the system tends to want to grow. The system tends to want to capture more energy, free energy, and consume it and use it towards further growth. And so to me, the key metric of growth that we should be aiming for is how much free energy are we capturing from our environment? So how much energy are we producing, right? And so the Kardashev scale is just a logarithmic scale. It's kind of a set of milestones of how big civilization is. Kardashev type 1, so the first milestone is when we capture and consume as much energy as is impeding onto Earth from the sun. And then type 2 is capturing all the energy of the sun or the equivalent thereof. And then type 3 is of the galaxy, right? And so it's kind of an infinite goal, because I think if we get stuck in sort of these sort of anthropocentric zero-sum goals of this sort of zero-sum thinking of like bringing AI on board is gonna take away our jobs. It's like, no, we're gonna do more. As long as the system can keep growing and there's more out there, there's more free energy out there, there's gonna be more upside. We're just gonna do more if we have more capabilities, and that's the sort of thinking we're trying to spread. It's actually, there's basically an infinite game of positive sum growth, and if we have more advanced tools, we're just gonna aim higher, and that's why Elon is like always talking about expanding to Mars and expanding civilization to the stars. And to me, the metric that's more continuous is, what is the scale of civilization on the Kardashev scale, right? And so that should be our objective. And of course, in my case, I'm working on the most efficient machine to turn energy into value or energy into intelligence. And my thesis is that by creating this machine and making it widely adopted, essentially it's going to generate more demand for energy, and it's going to help us climb the Kardashev scale. And so that's my goal. Yeah.
All right, we've got about 2.5 minutes left until we are going to be taking questions, prioritizing questions from our students. So start thinking about those, if you will. And remember, if you can just try to keep them very, very short. And then, perhaps some of the more, if you have more technical things that you really want to nerd out with, Gil later, depending on his schedule. Maybe you'll even join us at Cooper's Barbecue tonight.
Oh, yeah, I'll figure it out.
Talk to that would be amazing. Okay, all right. So, yes, actually, no, I think we are ready for questions. So do we have those? Okay, we got a question up here.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Guru.
If you'd introduce yourself and tell you where you're from.
Sure. Yeah, my name is Gurmali from Seattle. I work in Amazon. I would like to understand your thoughts on integrating AI with quantum. I feel like the existing AI is the greatest threat to the minorities because when you tune a model with 100 set of data, let's say 99 people says Earth is flat and 1% says Earth is not. So, the existing AI, I believe it will consider it as an outlier, that 1% is an outlier, and it will give answer stating Earth is a flat. Okay. I want to understand your thoughts on how we can solve this problem with integrating AI with quantum.
Okay, all right. So did you understand the question?
Yeah. So we work on thermodynamic computers. It's no longer quantum, right? So very, very much left the field of quantum. I worked on quantum machine learning. I think it's mostly applicable to to quantum data, so for material science. But let's say we're talking about thermodynamic computing and how to deal with the problem of capturing tail events, right? Capturing tail events, let's say I'm trying to predict the weather and once in a while there's a hurricane, right? And if I just focus my model on predicting the weather statistically and to be good enough most of the time, then it's going to completely ignore hurricanes in the data set, right? And this is what is happening with self-driving cars. I think the big challenge there is because the distribution of outcomes in nature was generated by a physical process that has a certain amount of complexity to it. And if your AI model, when you run your AI model, doesn't have enough complexity, it can't capture the tail events as you go deeper in the tails, right? And there's a whole beautiful theory about fat tail distributions and complexity. But essentially with thermodynamic computing, because we can generate distributions of much higher complexity, because we can do samples 10,000, 100,000, 1 million times more energy efficiently, and at least 1,000 times faster than current day approaches, then we're going to be able to capture those tail events with far less data and far less parameters. And that's what we're going to put out. And so, you're not going to need as much data for self-driving cars. You're not going to need as much data to train your models. And for the very technical people in the audience, basically we're deep in the test time compute scaling law, as OpenAI calls it. But we have to create this new paradigm of computing to really unlock that without, using all the power on Earth to do every calculation.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Terrific. Next question. Okay, we got one here in the front. Right there. Go ahead.
Hello, this is Yamil from Universidad de la Libertad, Mexico, and I just have a real question. How do you distinguish between strategic ambition and blind pursuit of money in tech entrepreneurship?
What was the second one?
How do you distinguish between strategic ambition and blind pursuit of money in tech entrepreneurship?
So how do you distinguish between strategic ambition and blind pursuit of money in tech entrepreneurship?
Yeah, I mean, if I wanted to pursue money, I would have taken many other jobs than this one. I think in this case, it was just really you got to figure out what does the world need, right? And how are you uniquely suited to provide it to the world? And you will create so much value to the world that you will capture some of it, right? That is the deal you do as an entrepreneur. If you're just thinking about money, there are much lower variance bets, with much higher expectation value that you can take, right? There's all sorts of jobs out there. And this is a sort of calculation you got to do for yourself, right? Like, do you want to be well off and it to be a sure thing, or are you all in? Do you want to pursue something that's meaningful and you either make it and then those who make it do pretty well, or you don't make it and you actually, lost a lot of capital relative to other opportunities you could have pursued. And for me, I tried this sort of cog in the machine path. It wasn't for me. I needed to feel like I was all in on what I was pursuing. I think in general, again, like, if you look at Elon and so on, I mean, most of his wealth is just like from just having holdings in his companies, and they have value because he's all in and committed to doing really ambitious things. So I think we have to like change. Wealth is kind of a byproduct from just having really high agency and having shares in a company, so that you can your personal reward function is tied to the outcome of the company, and that keeps you aligned with the interests of the company. And if your company does really well, then on paper,
right,
you're doing really well, but it's not liquid wealth, right?
Yeah.
And realistically, people that are playing an infinite game, like Elon and I, any sort of wealth you have, you put it
right
all
back
in on the next thing that would help civilization even further, right?
Yeah.
And so, Elon had some liquidity. He went all in. He bought X. We're here having this conversation right now, not living in a potentially oppressive regime, thanks to that. And then he also created XAI, which is now creating a sort of balance in the AI ecosystem.
Yeah.
And so in general, I would say if you're trying to be an entrepreneur for the money, you're really not in it for the right reasons. It's really the mission, and you may or may not make it,
right,
but you got to be at peace with that, and you got to be all in.
Yeah, I mean, because it's one thing is a question of the money, and then the other one is a question of memento mori, that you have this one life,
Yep.
and your time is very limited.
Exactly.
And how do you want to spend that limited time on Earth? And are you somebody that sees a big challenge that you want to solve, and that you want to, grind and go at it, with ferocity? Even if it makes money or not. And kind of the counter to that is sort of the effective altruism, right? Where it's like, okay, yeah, you're making a lot of money.
No, they don't care how they're, what they're doing to make their money. They just want to make money through any sort of arbitrage or grift or whatever. I mean, or in the case of SBF, literally a scam. And then reallocate that capital so that they can virtue signal to their nonprofits. Unfortunately, eventually, the whole movement got co-opted by the AI doomers, and then they were just putting money towards regulatory capture. So then they were kind of not really being a positive value add to the world, I would say, like FTX and so on. And compared to let's say a Tesla or SpaceX or Extropic, as we scale, I think it's going to be very impactful for the world. And so really, I would say, don't just aim to make money. You should really the way to think about it, the EOC way to think about it is what actions can I take as a corporation or as an entrepreneur that will maximize the growth of civilization? And that's the way Elon thinks, and that's how he's gotten so wealthy. It's how can I create the most value for the system that is civilization and the market, and just start executing on that, and the rewards will come, right? The system will reward you back.
All right, next question.
Since its inception,
introduce yourself.
My name is Aaron Tao. I work in the private sector, primarily in financial services. Since its inception, the Bitcoin network has been resistant to hacking. So I'm curious to know your perspective. If more advances in quantum computing would pose a threat or further enhance its security or make it even better.
Yeah, no, I mean, I would joke that, if I were given a really large quantum computer, the first thing I would do is hack Satoshi's wallet, because that's a, bounty of a few $1 billion. In principle, we will get there. I think within 10 to 15 years. Could be 7 if some timelines accelerate. But the estimates is that we need a 1 million qubit quantum computer, and right now we're kind of stuck at the 200 range for most quantum computers. And it's not just the number, it's you got to scale the number and the quality at the same time. So it's kind of you got to reach this sort of break even where scaling up is worth it, and you're getting out more compute than you're putting in a way, with error correction. And so that's going to take some time. But I think Bitcoin will just migrate to a different chain, or there's going to be a fork as the quantum threat comes online. But it is real. It is real. It's not just a fable for fear mongering, but there's other types of encryption that you can migrate to that are quantum resistant. So the system would adapt. But of course that goes against the whole ethos of Bitcoin, that is you don't touch the chain and so on. But if there's a fork that's created, people would migrate, I think. Yeah.
Okay. Next question.
Hi, my name is Roger. My question is, do you think that applying AI to issues of embodied cognition or applying AI to issues of art, or the two of those in combination, would help the acceleration movement?
Yeah, I think we've had a lot of progress in the world of bits, and not that much progress in the world of atoms. It still takes a lot of capital to build anything in the physical world, especially in the United States, where labor is not cheap. And I think embodied intelligence is going to really unlock a lot of leverage in the physical world to build things. And if we want to, live in a United States that has beautiful, awesome infrastructure, we're going to need robots. We're going to need embodied intelligence. But to unlock that capability, we're going to need a densification of compute. We're going to need a lot more intelligence per watt, because right now I don't think GPUs are going to unlock robotics, despite what Jensen says. If you talk to all the robotics companies, most of their power is going to the GPU, and it's not even close to enough compute to run the models required to process all the inputs and decide actions in real time. And so, part of our mission is to enable that revolution. Yeah.
Next question in the center back of the room. Yep.
I want to
introduce yourself too.
Yes. Hi, my name's Juno, and I also immigrated into the free world, and I want to ask you more on thinking about risk. I'm here largely thanks to my father, great man, and I inherited a lot of his thinking by observing his way of being and his success at a very young age. However, like the world I'm in and the world he's in are very different, and my father is very risk averse. Rationally, I know that I have to unlearn a lot of that, but like emotionally, well, I'm scared. So I want to ask, just what's your secret sauce of being so daring as an entrepreneur and going against just everything in your background? Thank you.
Yeah, it's funny. I always think about why do parents always push their kids to take the minimal risks path? I think from a self-interest perspective, they don't. I think they're trying to minimize regret, but at the same time, they won't be around. If you've taken the career path that's much more conservative, and then you're not satisfied with your life much deeper in your career. At the end of the day, you gotta take a decision for yourself. You can't just let prescriptions from your elders or from institutions tell you what to do. You gotta go with your gut. And in general, if you think things through from first principles, you might have, as individuals, we can go down a niche and build some expertise in something, build a thesis that's very different from the pack, and it doesn't mean, collectivist thinking is always deferring your cognition to the pack. As an individual, you can just actually build a thesis that's more correct than the pack, and then you should bet on that because you have some divergence, and that's, a market alpha, and there's upside in doing so. And so I would say, follow your curiosity, go down the rabbit holes of all kinds, and eventually you'll find something that, hey, actually this is a divergence from what other people are doing. Maybe I should go and do this, and I'm gonna build a lot of my conviction internally, and even if others don't get it initially, it doesn't matter, I gotta pursue it, and eventually they'll adjust their beliefs and see that, I was closer to truth than they were. Right. So that's the way to go.
The other thing, Juno, is to practice taking risks that are, doing things that scare you, maybe, and you're already doing it. You're up asking questions. You're up on the karaoke stage, and just finding other ways to start building that muscle where you are getting the muscle memory that says, I am resilient, I can do this, I can fall, I don't care, I can keep going. So that's just another thought. All right, 2 minutes and 19 seconds, so one more question.
This will be our last question, like Jag said. On my way. We're coming up here to the front.
Hi, MJ Mehdi, also from New York. And first of all, thank you for honoring your commitment and coming. My question is more of an engineering and public policy question. How do you think in January DeepSeek was able to bridge the gap between OpenAI and itself? And the second part is, do you think it was a failure on part of the Biden administration? Thank you.
I think, for years with Beff and so on, I was warning that, if we over-centralize research and only allow 1, 2, or 3 big labs to be the ones to do AI research, there's basically a concept staking risk, right? There's choices in the design of these AI architectures and how we train them. And if we only have a few bets, we're going to put too many eggs in the same basket, right? Or a local neighborhood of baskets. And then China came in with a completely different approach to reinforcement learning and training, and then disrupted things, right? There's a risk of disruption if we don't let a sort of free market and open exploration happen. That's why I've been encouraging open source, some open source collaboration, so that a lot more brilliant minds, brilliant individuals can contribute to AI research, so that we can explore the landscape of ideas much better and have a better sense of there's an opportunity right around the corner. And so, yes, I think, especially the previous administration, they want to just focus on the, crown a few big labs and just give them the monopoly over doing AI research, and that will lead to more and more and more DeepSeek moments like we've seen. But I'm not I'm not too worried now. I mean, I think the big labs have adopted this technique, right, and improved their approach. But there will be other breakthroughs that massively reduce costs. I mean, for one, our hardware someday is going to really change the calculations there. So.
Fantastic. Well, everyone, give a huge round of applause for Gil for moving Kevin and Eric to come here. Yep. Thanks for watching. Want to see some more Ayn Rand? Hit that subscribe button below, like the video, and I'll see you next time.